Hello, a very warm welcome to this video. This video is discussing mathematics and worship and how the two are related. But to start off this video, here's a bit of music to hopefully help you get into the mood. I'll just let it play a bit before going on to the content of this presentation. I'm sharing with you something that I've learned in my own practice of devil worship. So to the left we can see this is a reminder statue of Baphomet, which caused controversy in America, closely associated with the Satanic Temple and all Satanic forces. thank you for listening to that. Now we'll move on to the content of this, and there'll be a bit of, hopefully, meditative music at the end of this talk. So, the reason I'm covering symbols really is that symbols have been used since ancient times. In fact, since we first kind of evolved, we were drawing symbols on caves, and therefore symbols have a deep meaning because we make markings on stone or paper, and so draw symbols, and those symbols are designed to convey a message. They're designed to get a point across, particularly if that point is quite abstract or more conceptual. Often a symbol can contain the result of many, many words. And the good thing with symbols is they're more pictorial and therefore communicate better a more general idea than words, since words are much more specific and much better at relating to a very specific thing. So that's why symbols are seen everywhere, or partly why they are, even in the occult. And the occult uses symbols extensively, as does various religions, which are put under the category of the occult, such as Satanism, Luciferianism, and devil worship. Now, for me, because I don't really encourage that much practice of magic, and for me, that's not really, why I'm drawn to Satanism. For me, the point of symbols is not magic, because I tend not to practice it, though I do practice communication with demons, and indeed communicating has a lot to do with symbols, particularly given the beings I'm communicating with. I don't know always how to interpret the responses, or how to say the question I'm asking, or how to talk with them always in a very meaningful way using English words, but symbols display things more clearly, and they're open to subjectivity, meaning it's more of a two-way conversation and more of a sharing of ideas and thoughts than specific things. So symbols are very, very important. A lot of people might associate symbols in the occult and magic. For me, symbols are really associated with communication. Indeed, we can use them to communicate between people who speak two completely different languages. So symbols act as a road to kind of communication, and in this sense perform a functional task, but they also act as a road to knowledge and are therefore keys, because particularly in the world of mathematics, symbols are there to demonstrate a concept, but these networks of concepts written in the form of a series of equations actually leads to some result. There is some conclusion from which you can draw from it. For example, if I integrate the Gaussian distribution from a starting point of kind of 1 out to infinity, 0 out to infinity along the x-axis, where the peak is at 1 on the y-axis, then what I get is the square root of pi. And what does the square root of pi have to do with the Gaussian distribution? Well, very little, but it's because the Gaussian distribution is so symmetrical that pi appears. So my conclusion that I draw from my mathematical work with symbols is that pi is associated with symmetry, not so much circles, which is quite a cool conclusion to draw, given that one would often think about pi in the context of circles, but actually it's much deeper, it's to do with symmetry, and that argument described by a series of symbols demonstrates this very clearly. So symbols when you connect one symbol with another, they're like putting together pieces of a jigsaw, and together they show you a new picture, a new way of looking at the world or reality, and therefore they act as keys to knowledge. They're like kind of keys that you put into the door to open it. And as the left-hand path is extensively concerned with pushing the limits of one's knowledge and continually opening new doors, fearlessly opening these doors, symbols have a lot of meaning in that context. So the network of concepts written in the form of symbols should create sentences, and these should encapsulate what you were trying to do. But by sentences, I just mean a phrase drawn from a series of symbols. It doesn't have to be a phrase in a particular language. It's just a collection of symbols which together communicate a specific point that you can't communicate with just one of the symbols or another symbol. So that's why symbols are useful. And because symbols are about communication, they are incredibly personal, and therefore I would strongly advise anyone who is doing kind of devil worship or anything like that to design their own symbols. Make them personal to you, because you are communicating something of your mind, something of your heart, and therefore they are incredibly personal. However, at first it is helpful to begin by using a given set of symbols and then just gradually take note of what experiences you have and what symbols best reflect those experiences. Unless, of course, one feels prompted to do otherwise. As always, this is only advice. None of this is black and white. This is just something I personally found that, it's good to create your own and not just stick with ones which are handed down, because you want to make these communications with demons personal and share ideas with the fullest clarity you can, and another person's set of symbols might not allow you to do this. But when creating your own set of symbols, there are problems that you will encounter. Firstly, the tapestry of symbols has to interweave, but do so correctly and without tying itself into knots. And this is a problem that one comes up with also when creating languages, because I read a lot of stories where kind of languages have been invented. I'm a massive fan of Tolkien, and one of the challenges I found after reading them and trying to create my own language is that it's very hard to prevent these newer words not to start contradicting each other. So if you've got one symbol which suggests one thing and another symbol that suggests the other, but they're so far apart in a very particular way such that they start to contradict one another, what you're building there when you use them is inconsistency. If you use them both, you have an inconsistent statement, and it's going to be very confusing and lead to confusing conversations between you and the beings you're working with or talking to, and therefore it's very advisable to try to, after you've made your symbols, have a review of them, make sure they aren't contradictory in an intellectual or even an emotional sense. They can do different things, they can even represent different opinions, but they do represent things so differently that they don't make sense together. Then just beware, don't put them together, unless you're intentionally talking about a confusion which can be represented as those two symbols being kind of localized and close proximity. So kind of symbols are like notes, and if the melody is confusing, then no clarity will be obtained when speaking to demons. Just something to really keep in mind there. And also, you've got to make sure when you're presenting your symbols that you have some grammar in place that allows you to stress the most important ones, so the important ones will not be overwhelmed by less important ones. But that's not really a problem when you're inventing your symbols. It's more of a problem when you're putting them together and trying to create some kind of grammar that is rules by which the symbols work in alignment with each other, such that you can ask a question and many questions, but a particular idea is emphasised. So it's up to you how you do that. But, again, clarity is everything. And here are simply a few symbols. And these symbols are actually Norse symbols. However, I am using them here because they are used in the Book of Shadows. And the Book of Shadows is essentially a occult book. It's quite useful. I have it more so for reference, but it does have a series of symbols. So, as well as inoculum, which I mentioned in a video a while ago, this is a good alphabet to use. And you can see what Latin letters the symbols refer to. But to just go through a few of them, really. So the symbol that looks looks like a kind of tree with two diagonal sticks coming out from it, which is the English letter F. So the one on the top left, that symbol, according to the Book of Shadows, is representing essentially the beast of burden. So a slavish, stupid, slow, domesticated and marred, cowardly kind of sense. And this is a sending ring used in magic. And it's essentially a symbol that can be associated with wandering, or alternately growth, and it has a few positive aspects, such as mobility, which again is often associated with wandering. They come kind of hand in hand. And if you look at the letter W, that represents again another destructive rune, but this one of chaos and power, and you use it to break down barriers and to transform and create, according to the Book of Shadows anyway. But as I say, the Book of Shadows has a list of kind of these symbols and what they mean, but the important thing is really make your own. But it's good to have a reference guide for a particular set of symbols, a kind of standard one, and a good way to begin is use a real set of symbols, because then you have some structure, some grammar already in place. For instance, ancient Norse. I really hope you like this video. I know this will be long, has been a bit long, but I hope you've enjoyed it. Here's some music.